Welcome to the Nerd and Normie podcast. For a very special episode, we are going to be recapping / revisiting the first 5 Fast and Furious movies.
Very exciting. We're going to do the next 5 next week to include Fast 10 as it's being released.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun this weekend rewatching these, and we're going to share our thoughts on how the franchise started and where it's heading, and just kind of our overall excitement for Fast 10.
It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning.
Alright, so to kick us off, The Fast and the Furious came out in 2001 and was directed by Rob Cohen, and stars Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster, Matt Schultz, Johnny Strong, Rick Yoon, and many, many more characters. Yeah, so these movies started with this one, and it's so different from where they are now. Am I right? This is your first time watching this one?
Yeah, I didn't know that they were, a gang of DVD players stealing thieves and thugs.
Who just hang out at their local garage and high-five each other and work on cars together and go street racing for fun.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, and it's also very 2001. All the outfits, the music, the just general vibe of the movie is just kind of funny to revisit now. No movie like this would get made nowadays.
And Everett thinks that Paul Walker looks more attractive in his little suit and his haircut later on, but I think he looked cute with the curly blonde hair. Not so much the outfits, though.
Yeah.
And Michelle Rodriguez looks 12 in the first one. She looks so young.
Yeah, I mean, she was 20, 21-ish when it filmed, so...
Yeah.
So yeah, in this movie, Paul Walker is undercover for the LAPD, trying to infiltrate some street racing to figure out if they can deduce who's stealing these DVD players from trucks on the highway. And so he kind of ends up falling for Vin Diesel's character, Dom, his sister, and gets in with them and kind of becomes friends with them, and uses them as his in to start this investigation. And it's a lot of male energy butting heads. All the police are hot shots who want to prove themselves, and Paul Walker's ready to fist fight anyone, and anyone is ready to fist fight him. And it's just a lot of squaring up, throwing punches, yelling at each other, talking about how their car is going to do the talking. A lot of mumbo jumbo about cars that really means absolutely nothing, but yeah.
It's special. We're not really going to do like spoiler free or spoiler sections of this, so if you haven't seen them, I don't know, figure it out. They came out 20 years ago. But my biggest issue with this, it's not even the masculine energy, whatever. It's the fact that they spend the whole time saying that they're family, and then their poor little friend Jesse gets shot and killed in front of their house, and they're just like, eh. And then it's over, and they just move on.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. They wanted, obviously, to set up these emotional beats like that because they want drama and whatnot, but they also just clearly don't know what, like, it's not a drama. This is just, like, a fun action adventure-y kind of movie. It's supposed to just be fun and cool. And so when they hit these moments, such as shooting a good friend who you've kind of taken under your wing in the chest and watching him die in front of your house, they don't really know how to handle it, so their answer is car chase with little to no emotion.
And it's the same with, like, Paul Walker's character and Vin Diesel's sister, Mia, when they're, like, in love or whatever. Like, I get that they only, like, hook up once in the first one, but they act like it's, like, a big romance. But he literally kisses someone else in the next movie. And then when they come back all together, they act like nothing ever happened, and they're just in love again.
Yeah, it's very much the syndrome of many more like kind of blockbustery movie like this, where it's, oh, we have two attractive people, they'll fall in love, and you're just, because they're the main male and main female, that's just what it is, and we accept that as an audience, and they don't really try to develop them or give reason. The only reason they start dating is one of the friends, Vince, kind of likes her, has a thing for her, and gets really mad that Paul Walker is starting to like her and hang around and stuff. And she goes out on a date with Paul Walker just to get back at Vince. And that's it. And then suddenly they're in love.
Yeah, Vince really gets the short straw in terms of this entire franchise. Like, he has grown up with Vin Diesel, and his sister, and has been in love with her forever. Well, as much love as he's capable of. And his whole team just calls him stupid the whole time. And then he points out that Paul Walker is a cop, and they're like, no, you're just an idiot. And then when Paul Walker is a cop, they're just like, you're still an idiot, and we pick him over you. And then they finally get back together in this 5th one, and he's happily been living somewhere with his wife or girlfriend or whatever, and they have a baby. And he helps them get this job, and then something goes wrong, and they immediately blame him for it, kick him off. And then he saves someone's life, the sister's life, and they're like, okay, yeah, you can come back on the team now that you've proven yourself. And then he dies. Like, he is the worst character arc out of everyone in the show, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And back to the first movie, it is really just funny that there's a little bit of, like, cool heist specific gear and gadgets with Dominic's crew robbing, because they are, and they end up being the robbers, not the people they think it is or whatever. And they, like, shoot a grappling hook through the trucks and jump onto it and do all this kind of cool spy stuff. But that's like maybe 3 minutes of an hour and a half, 2 hour runtime. And then if you know where this franchise goes, that becomes the entire focus of the movies. And it's really just funny. I also love that there's this world in which the undercover cop who's infiltrating the street racing gang, they don't get a mechanic who's going to just help work on the cars. They don't just get someone who wants to hang out and be a groupie. No, they get a guy, and they keep giving him these impounded cars and limitless budget to tune them up and buy parts for them and all of this stuff to go race and crash them over and over again. Because Paul Walker loses basically every race that he enters in this.
For the whole series.
Yeah, and just smashes car after car, and rightfully the police are like, I don't know if this is the right way to go about this investigation. He's like, no, but it is. I know these guys did it. And he's pointing to this, like, rival gang, and they didn't do it. They had a bunch of DVD players, but they didn't steal them. It says, they come up in the system as bought legally, and then we find out later it is Vin Diesel's gang stealing them. So, yeah, he throws all of this away, and it's just really, really dumb that they keep funding this. But obviously, like, what are you supposed to do? We want car races. We want dumb 2000s music blaring really loud as we get awful CGI cars going into warp speed when they hit the NOS button. But it's fun, It is enjoyable.
I wish every one of my problems could be solved by a street race, which seems to be the case if we move into Tokyo Drift, when literally they're like, I know we owe you $1 billion, mafia mob guy, but instead I'm gonna street race your nephew.
Yeah, that's how it works. Everything's just a street race. But yeah, and so just to kind of cap off this first movie, they bust Dominic's gang and they figure out it's him or whatever, and the police are going to come get him, and he and Paul Walker have built up this kind of mutual respect. But of course, when he finds out Paul Walker's a cop, because Paul calls in someone to save them, Vin Diesel gets all mad, obviously, and
yeah, Vince gets shot in that one too.
Oh yeah, it was Vince who got shot. Yeah, so Vince gets shot and dangled off the side of a car and dragged around by his arm for a while in the desert. And Paul Walker calls in police to save him. like paramedic or whatever, and that's how Vin Diesel figures out he's part of the police, gets angry, and then they meet back up at the house to kind of talk things through. Jesse dies, they go on a car chase, and then Vin Diesel takes out his dad's legendary car he's been working on, and it has so much torque it twisted the chassis last time. And as someone who studied physics for a little while at college, the fact that you would build a car with the idea of going fast for a drag race and have it lift its front two tires off is just losing that contact patch, losing that bit of rubber on the ground is going to slow you down.
Not to mention it's a ton of American-made steel, you know?
Yeah. So it's just, it's goofy, and if you know anything about cars or how they work, none of this would happen like this. But again, that's not the point of this movie. And so they end up with, like, there's a quarter mile to the train track or whatever, and they're going to race each other to get there, and Vin Diesel wins, and they just barely jump in front of the train, and they're just doing it just 'cause. There's not really a reason, I guess, to gain each other's respect and see if they're willing to race each other or whatever.
They're willing to ride or die, babe.
Yeah. And then they land, and it's all like, oh, they didn't get hit by the train, and then immediately crash in a horrific way. And then Paul Walker just tosses Vin Diesel his keys and goes, hey, I respect you now. I'm no longer, even though I'm a policeman who's supposed to arrest you, I'm going to just let you walk. And he does.
Yep.
And then the movie's over. And that is The Fast and the Furious.
Which leads us into Too Fast, Too Furious.
Which I really respect them on the naming for this one. Most movies would try and come up with some sort of better title, but they went for what all of the fans would joke about and just called it Too Fast, Too Furious with the number 2. Yeah, so this one was directed by John Singleton and it's related to some of the later ones with characters that come back, but it's almost entirely unrelated to the first one other than Paul Walker. And Vin Diesel's not at all in this one. It's the only movie in the entire franchise he doesn't appear in. And Paul Walker has gone to hide away in Miami, just kind of chilling on a houseboat. Seems to be either renting from or just chilling with Ludacris.
Yeah.
So in this movie, Paul Walker's hiding out in Miami, and there is a crime boss in the area who's looking for drivers to get a big score to the airstrip so he can fly it back over the borders, running, drugs or whatever. And the police, again, are looking for someone to infiltrate the driving market or whatever, become a driver and get hired.
Even though they already do have a woman cop on the inside, but whatever. So it's like they already know that he's a bad guy.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that they needed to make sure the goods got there and they knew they were going to be there and they could track it. So when they go and try and arrest him, they're definitely there. But she also could just call it in if she was going to be there, which is potentially what's going to happen. Anyway, they want the drivers there, extra people, to get, the movie to happen. And so Paul Walker gets caught by the police or whatever, and they convince him to help them out in exchange for a clean record. And so he then says, I'm picking my partner, because you gotta have a partner for this one. And so he goes and finds Tyrese Gibson's character, Roman Pierce, who is just kind of like a wisecracking...
Not in this one, though.
Yeah, he's still,
kind
busting
of
each other and just, he's not as, funny as the other ones, but he is snarky, and he's constantly, trying to steal stuff from people and always
authority
eating.
Figures.
Yeah, always eating in every scene, basically.
He has a fast metabolism.
Yeah.
My beef with this one is that already there's nothing scarier than a psychotic white man. But instead, they tried to make him like a tough, I don't even know mob type guy. And they gave this villain these cigars to smoke in every scene. And they looked so ridiculous with him. It was just so embarrassing. I don't know why they did that.
Yeah, they picked the largest circumference cigar for the smallest mouthed man, and it does look pretty awkward.
Yeah, you need to be like a Tom Selleck type guy to smoke a cigar and look cool, you know?
Yeah. And so the person on the inside for this one is Ava Mendez, and she's there.
She's fine.
It's basically she's there so Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson can hit on someone and make inappropriate comments about her outfits.
Yeah.
And the bad guy can be possessive over someone, and they can once again get in fistfights over women, as is this franchise's hallmark. But yeah, this one, it's a lot of people don't really like this one. I can see why. It's not like any of the others per se. It's a little goofier. It's, it doesn't revolve around street racing and have that kind of like vibe of the first movie of just kind of goofy counterculture type stuff that would appeal to both a wider audience and people in that world. And at the same time, it doesn't try and be more of a comedy or more of an action movie. It's just kind of there and washes over you.
I also think they should have used Tyrese Gibson because, like, at the beginning, his job or what he's doing, he does, like, the demolition derby type stuff. Like, he's driving real cars as bumper cars, and then they never use it again in the franchise, which seems odd to me because in the fifth one or whatever, when they're gathering people, he could have been, like, a guy who can take a hit or something. But instead they put Han as like a chameleon, him as like a sweet talker. It just seemed odd. I feel like they could have brought that back in somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think they liked Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris from this movie, but they didn't really like anything about their characters or what happened in this movie because basically none of it comes back ever.
Yeah.
Outside of them existing in the franchise going forward. And a few references like, oh yeah, my time in Florida, I knew you. And then they move on.
Yep.
And I honestly kind of feel that way about this whole movie, It's not...
They were in Florida once.
Yeah, it's not like a bad watch, but it's probably the least interesting of at least the first 5.
Yeah.
Which I guess leads us into Tokyo Drift, which is the first one directed by Justin Lin.
This one I also feel like is very out of place. Like, I could see the fact that they, like, obviously it was already, like, a franchise, but they kind of were edging on, like, the anthology idea instead of keeping all the characters together. And it's, like, good because it introduces Han and he's, like, one of the best characters, but it just is, like, pointless and weird. And I also have a really big ick trying to root for high schoolers to hook up and crash cars and die. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right at the start, it might be college, but it's got a very high school vibe to it.
No, it's high school because when they go to Tokyo, he goes to high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is college. It is high school, and right at the start, the Lucas Black's character, Sean, has like an old beater car that he's fixed up. It's not really a beater, but an older car that he's kind of fixed up and is working on, and this other guy has his dad's $80,000 Corvette, and so there's a little bit of beef, and the girlfriend of the Corvette guy is like not really flirting, but just talking to him with a little bit of a smile, knowing kind of that she's gonna annoy her boyfriend because he's a weird possessive man. And I say man because everyone in this movie is like 40 years old playing high schoolers, except for Bow Wow, who looks like he's in high school.
Yeah. But to be fair, it's the early 2000s. Like, have you watched The Vampire Diaries? Everyone in the early 2000s who played a high schooler. Yeah.
Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, they're a billion years old.
Yeah. It's just kind of funny revisiting that era when now it is much more common to cast people of the correct age in those roles. But yeah, anyway, so there's a bunch of grown men being high schoolers, and so Lucas Black and the boyfriend end up kind of racing each other. The boyfriend keeps his girlfriend in the car for whatever reason. Also, she's like, you can race for me.
Gross.
Just out of nowhere, she decides that they can race for her, and she's like, "Oh, don't you love me?" when her boyfriend's going too slow. Weird bit of character work there, but whatever. And so yeah, they race. He not only destroys his car, but like $100,000 in property damage or more, and endangering of many people's lives, and just really dumb. And this is not his first time getting in trouble for reckless driving and property damage and all that stuff.
Yeah, and for some reason his options are go to jail and be tried as an adult or go live with his dad in Tokyo, which I feel like the police would not give you that option.
Yeah, I think the only reason they can kind of swing it in a very loose sense, again, not based in reality, is his dad's part of the Navy, so it's like a go be in a military family in a Navy situation and stuff, and like you're out of our jurisdiction and issues. But yeah, so he goes to Tokyo, obviously does not speak Japanese or anything, has this really awful Alabama accent. His username as his little like chat box thing is Bama Boy. And yeah, this movie I think would actually be pretty good if you swapped him for almost any other character in these movies.
Yeah, and that's probably why they don't keep him in the franchise, but...
Yeah.
Which sucks, because, like, he did play the part fine. Like, I don't want to hate on the actor.
Yeah.
It was just...
It's not his fault.
Right for the movie.
But yeah, I think this was clearly Han's movie once they got through the edit and they realized, oh, Han's the one who comes across really cool and we want to keep him around. And so, yeah, this movie is just... He learns about drifting, and that drifting exists, and that you don't have to just drive in a straight line and smash into the wall to be able to turn really quick. And so he wants to impress some people and gets a chance to drift Han's car, and he can't, and he smashes it all up, so he's in Han's debt, and is forced to kind of be a runner now for this minor drug lord guy. Whose uncle is part of the Yakuza.
Yeah. Which is, okay. This is another thing that I have beef with this franchise. So, as it turns out, Han is stealing from Yakuza guy's nephew, and that gets them in trouble, and Han dies, but apparently doesn't in real, whatever. But he dies in this movie because he's stealing from them even though they're partners. And this is where my beef comes in. Every character in this movie is a bad guy. And I get that they're like...
They're family.
Yeah, I get that they're supposed to be like likable bad guys, whatever. But like, anytime you're hoping that... Like in the first one, you're like, oh, there's no way they're stealing these DVD players and killing all these people. They are! Like... They're always bad. The second one's like the only one so far they haven't been the bad guys. The third one, yeah, he's stealing from that guy. And it's like, yeah, he's another criminal, whatever. It's what we do. But like, how are you ever supposed to trust him? You're all criminals. And then like the fourth one, Paul Walker's character's in the FBI. Guess what he still is? A bad guy. The fifth one, do you know what the entire mission is? Robbing someone. Like, I know that they're also robbing another criminal, but they're not good people.
Yeah, and as these movies go on, the body count rises. The number of fatal or near-fatal car crashes rises exponentially. The amount of property damage, again, back to the third movie, Justin Black's character, every time he drifts, he hits a wall until the end, or someone else's car, or nearly runs people over. And it's just... It's a lot of smashing. It's a lot of that just kind of ridiculous. Nobody would keep driving. He would have broken a shoulder. He would have gotten whiplash. He would have...
Yeah.
And
at
again,
least they kind of get hurt in some of the others.
Yeah. Again, I know these movies are not supposed to be taken 100% seriously, but at the same time, they're a little... I think this one, and why some people really don't like it, is it feels unnecessary and it's a little ridiculous. Why is this American guy who's never drifted before suddenly the best drifter in Japan after a few days of practice? and they're just like destroying cars just because they can. And it lacks some of the, I don't want to say like respect to car culture, because these movies are ridiculous. And if you know anything about cars, again, these are probably, they could be for you or could not be, depending on what you're looking for. But yeah, this movie, other than Han, adds nothing. And so that's kind of 2 movies in a row that don't add anything other than characters who we will like when they come back later.
Yeah, I agree.
And it ends with, as we said, just drifting down a mountain to race to see who can
drift the most to get them out of debt,
to absolve their debt. And I will say, like, it is kind of a dumb premise, but at the same time, there is a little bit of like, it's the nephew's fault that he's getting stolen from. It's his responsibility to solve this issue. I don't think, as long as his cut is getting paid appropriately, you could just take his money, the uncle, and so letting them just solve it in their own stupid, petty way is easy enough to just get him out of his hair. But obviously Lucas Black wins, and so everyone gets to walk away, except Han gets slammed in a car accident.
And then exploded.
To be continued.
But my beef with this one. Bow Wow does not get the redemption he deserves, okay? He gives all of his hard-earned money that he's been raising so that he can, live. He gives all of it to stupid Lucas Black's character. Sorry, Lucas Black isn't stupid, but the character is. And he gives all his money to him just for that guy to give it to the Yakuza people. And then they never thanks him. That's just it. And he deserves better, and he deserves a story arc or something.
Yeah. But yeah, so that kind of finishes up the third, and with that kind of ends this, I would say, almost like first era of Fast and Furious, in which it's racing focused, it's smaller crime, and not huge stakes, and just kind of these smaller, fun racing stories about these couple of characters. And with the fourth movie, which, not to be confused with the first movie, The Fast and the Furious, is just called Fast and Furious. The fourth movie is a little more actiony.
Yeah.
It's more about heists and gunfights and chases.
For some reason, the FBI brought back Brian O'Connor and is just...
Which is Paul Walker's character. I don't think we've actually
said his character name. Paul Walker's character. And for some reason are just allowing him to be in the FBI now. I know that he's... I don't know. I don't even know why. I was going to say I know he's put away bad guys, but he let Dom go. And then in the second one, he got his record wiped, but he also still stole stuff and got away. So...
Yeah, I think the idea is he was...
Oh, sorry. Pause for just 2 seconds. That's another thing, is at the end of the second one, they have a bunch of money that they're giving to the police, and they give him 3 bags, and the guys are like, okay, you're good to go. And he goes... What if I told you there was 6 bags of money? And then gives him 3 more bags. And they didn't search their car or anything. And it just seemed very out of place and weird. And that just popped into my head. Okay, we can continue with 4.
Yeah, so in this one, Paul Walker's back in the FBI. I think it's supposed to be like, well, he, was a good cop and then did them a solid with the second movie. And what else is he going to do? And they brought him in again. He's focusing on a drug cartel run by Braga, is the character's name. And he, again, needs runners and is doing stuff with fast cars to be able to pull off his drug runs and stuff. And so he's kind of their specialist in this world. And he's got a partner... who's named Michael Stasiak, and he is the worst. He's so annoying. He makes stupid judgment calls, and yeah, I get 100% Paul Walker is not to be trusted, because as we find out again, he continues to
Work with
side
Dom and let him go.
and let the bad guys go and help them and whatever. But at the same time, he gets in fights with Paul Walker and gets his nose broken against a wall for stupid reasons. He constantly is just like, oh, this isn't our guy. It is their guy. Oh, this won't work. But it does work. And
Calls that thing too early and they all rush the...
yeah. And the bad guy, Braga, the actual Braga, like, gets away. And he just kind of keeps fumbling everything. And not that had that not happened, like, Paul Walker wouldn't have sided with Dom. But in all honesty, if the Braga guy hadn't gotten away at that one moment,
They could have arrested him.
probably would have then arrested Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, and Paul Walker would have just continued working for the FBI, and that would be that. But no, this guy just kind of continues to be a hothead and annoying. But to kind of start this movie, Michelle Rodriguez's character Letty gets killed off screen, and Vin Diesel uses detective vision at the crime scene to just relive the moments, real Criminal Minds or, crime show vibes of seeing the crash around him as he just looks at skid marks and can suddenly tell a guy walked forward and shot her and all of this stuff.
Which he also eventually comes back to, and
It's
it
all
just...
explained. It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
But yeah, so she dies, air quotes. Figures out that there's this nitro meth stuff and there's only a couple places you can possibly get it, and he goes to a mechanic who's been selling it. And from the mechanic, he gets the name of another guy, and he goes and finds that guy and dangles him out a window, and Paul Walker happens to come by because he's looking for the same guy. They happen to be there at the same time. Vin Diesel just drops him out a window, and Paul Walker saves him. And then they just kind of go on their way hunting these guys, and both end up entering a race to be the runner because, again, Paul Walker is put in as the undercover cop who's going to be the street racing kind of guy. And so they do this street race with this weird computer simulation video game looking GPS stuff. And Paul Walker thinks he's going to win, and Vin Diesel clips his bumper and sends him spinning. And Paul Walker gets all hot-headed and mad about the fact that he cheated, but again, there were no rules. They were all slamming into each other and driving off the path and doing all sorts of stuff this whole time. I don't know why this one clip of the bumper was too far, but it was for Paul Walker.
Yeah, so, he recruits him. He recruits Vin Diesel, and then they also recruited this weird cowboy guy who has a weird fetish for feet and is the worst thing to look at. The actor is in one of my favorite scary movies, but this was just not a thing I wanted to see him in. So Paul Walker gets him arrested so that he can get recruited instead in his place. Whatever, they run drugs across the border and steal them and whatever so that they can bring Braga out so they can kill him in revenge. Well, kill one of his assistants in revenge for Letty, and Paul Walker can arrest Braga.
Yep, and so they go on the run, and they go through this weird tunnel under the border that somehow got built without Border Patrol noticing, despite them.
It looks like it was a mine shaft.
Yeah, but they have the door that opens and closes that looks like rock and stuff that had to get installed at some point. But, again, those things can be hand-waved and overlooked in a movie like this. And they get across the border, and they're delivering the drugs, and then turns out they're going to shoot the drivers, because you can always find more drivers, which is fair enough in terms of what the villains are doing. But the good guys in air quotes, figure this out. Vin Diesel turns on his NOS to fill up his car and starts his cigarette lighter, and then all of the cars explode. And everyone starts shooting each other, and Paul Walker just takes out about 5 guys despite being a federal agent.
Yeah.
And so they have to escape and drive back across because they're being chased.
And then he's already back in love with the sister.
Oh, yeah, they meet up and they're just back in love. Like,
yeah. She's like,
nothing
that's all
happened.
you have to say to me after 5 years? And then they kiss.
Yep. That's how, again, there's a thing in Hollywood movies. If a woman is crying and she is vulnerable, it is the perfect time to kiss her because she will immediately fall in love with you. So take notes, all men out there listening.
Stop.
That is the only way to get a woman.
That is so gross. It's literally so bad. And it's every movie.
It really is. If you start looking for it, if a woman is crying on screen, a man will come and kiss her in a blockbuster.
Yeah.
It's a fact. It's how it works.
It's so gross.
But anyway, so they end up, Vin Diesel and Paul Walker end up with the load of drugs and stuff that they were able to steal and get back across the border. And so they want to bring out Braga. Paul Walker convinces the FBI that this is the smartest way to do it. Instead of just taking the money off the street or taking the drugs off the street, because he'll just put in another shipment out because he doesn't care about it. So instead, I'm going to go and tell him he has to get it because he cares so much about it, which weird logic, and maybe we missed something, but I don't know. Whatever. Hand waving, they can convince Braga to come and meet with them. And so they go, and the guy who's supposed to be Braga comes out to meet with them, and they realize, oh, he's wearing pink. A guy who grew up on the streets would never wear a pink tie. And that's how they know it's not the real Braga. But the dumb FBI agents already called the raid, and they run in, and FBI agents just shoot down men who were not firing back at them, and take out about 20 guys. And
Braga gets away. He gives a smirk that makes them realize it was him all along, and he's not really an assistant, and whatever. Somehow, we watched all of them back to back to back. They end up back over the border, have to go through the tunnel thing again. And I think one of the most vile deaths that happens in this entire franchise of what we've watched so far is the guy who supposedly killed Letty is beating the crap out of Paul Walker outside their cars, and Vin Diesel's speeding up to him, and he tries to move out of the way, and Paul Walker just holds onto his foot, and Vin Diesel just slices him in half with his car. And yes, it doesn't show it, but oh my goodness, was that gruesome.
Yeah,
it was dark.
It's a wild moment just to see Paul Walker clutching this man's leg so he can't run away, and then he gets slammed with the car at 100 miles an hour.
Yep, and then he arrests Braga, Paul Walker does, and bing, bang, boom. That's the fourth.
That's the fourth. And so that leaves us with the last one for this episode, which is Fast 5.
Which is my favorite, I think, of the ones we've talked about. And it's one I've seen before, but it's good.
It's my favorite of the first 5, easily. It's the first one. They don't fully cross into insanity in this movie, but you can see where they're going.
Yeah.
And between the last movie and the, crazy tunnel and somewhat specialized cars and all of that kind of stuff.
And the truck robbing scene at the beginning when they steal the gasoline.
Yeah.
So something big we left out of the last one is Dom gets arrested at the end and ends up on a transport bus. Is it going? Oh, yeah. A transport bus to go to prison.
And you see Mia, Paul Walker, and some friends show up and break him out of the bus. And that sets off Fast 5, where they're on the run. They end up down in Rio de Janeiro, where they meet up with Vince once again. He now has a family, but is still doing crime and has such an easy job where they can just steal some cars and sell them off real quick. And so they go on this crazy train heist with a specialized truck that has a ramp and things to be able to get the cars off the train and onto the ground and stuff, and
which is where it starts leaning into the absurdity of the franchise.
For sure. And it turns out these cars have been seized by the DEA, and all of this kind of stuff going on in the background, so it's a bigger heist than they thought, and the agents get killed, and it's a big deal, and all blah 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 blah, hand wavy stuff. And so they have to go even further on the run,
So they bring in a specialist, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah, and so The Rock shows up, sent by the U.S. government to stop these 3 highly wanted fugitive. Well, they don't say that. Even though Mia shows up on all the wanted lists, they only ever say we want these two.
Yeah.
I guess they'll just let her walk.
She's just an accessory to crime.
Anyway, so The Rock is sent to get Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. And so at the same time, they figure out that in this car is a chip that has the biggest crime boss in all of Rio. His cash house is listed on it. And we also find out Mia is pregnant.
Yay!
Ooh, with Paul Walker's kid. And so they want to be able to get this money and get out for good and go disappear and whatever with the 100 million they could steal. So they assemble the team of best people in the world. And I guess we never mentioned Gal Gadot was in the fourth movie.
Yeah.
As a minor character.
I think it should have been a better plot twist to have her be the bad guy in number 4, because having the assistant guy be him was so predictable that I never once guessed it because I thought it would be too obvious.
Yeah. And so they pull in together their best team in Rio. They get Gal Gadot, they get Ludacris, Tyrese Gibson, Sung Kang, and the two kind of goofy guys who have pulled off heists with them in the past, who are like, they're there, but they never like directly talk to them or make them a part of anything. They don't feel like they're real characters.
I think they only speak Spanish.
They speak a little bit of English because they kind of flip in and out and stuff. But yeah, they're just kind of there to make up numbers, I guess.
I mean, they had to touch the poopy wall from the exploding toilet.
Yeah, I guess probably none of the main cast were willing to do that scene, so they had to write in these other guys.
They really sacrificed the most out of the team.
Yeah. So they assemble this best team to go in and pull off a heist and steal this money, and their big plan is to burn some of the money, get it all moved to a central location, which ends up being a police station, and it leads to the very famous bank vault scene in which they attach it to 2 cars and destroy half of Rio's downtown, driving it out of there.
Yeah.
All for it to just be empty.
Well, they swap it out. They sneak it so that they can trade it, because they save The Rock's life and some lady cop who has a dead husband, who apparently, because she has a dead husband, means that she has to be in love with Vin Diesel. I don't really care about that plot line. So they save The Rock, so he helps them with this heist, but they don't let him know that they steal the money. So at the end, when they swap the vaults, he's like, I'll give you 24 hours head start before I arrest you, but you need to leave the money with me. So
yeah, and right at the end, so the Rock's whole team that he sent there with gets killed by the drug lord guy they're stealing from, and he just walks past him, doesn't even look at him, and shoots him twice in the head, and just says, "That's for my team."
Which, I mean, I guess he's in another country where he should have no jurisdiction, but my goodness, is that illegal?
Yeah, so... But yeah, this one, it's got the most action. It's got some foot chases. It's got a big fist fight between The Rock and Vin Diesel. It's got dragging a bank vault around Rio.
It makes me almost believe that the sister and Paul Walker are in love.
Yeah. And so this one is the most action movie action.
But it does have more, like, foot chase scenes versus cars, which is odd. It's like they only really have maybe 2, maybe 3, like, actual car chase type scenes.
Yeah. And this feels almost more in line with like a Mission Impossible or James Bond, where there is a car chase or 2, but there's also a lot of other types of action. And honestly, I mean, the box office will show, I think this was a smart move for the franchise. Just doing street races, they would have had to really come up with some good ideas, whereas make good action with likable action stars is a much easier formula to replicate.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do going forward.
Yeah, once it escalates to, like, they're basically superheroes, it's a little much for me, but I'm excited to watch the other ones this week.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rumors and talk about the contracts and stuff between these action stars and how they, like, write out, you know, if Vin Diesel hits The Rock 5 times, The Rock has to hit Vin Diesel 5 times, and none of the fights can end with a clear winner. They have to end in a draw, and you can't do this, you can't do that. Vin Diesel and The Rock completely fell out and wouldn't even be on set together at the same time. All of this nonsense. This movie's clearly before that because they wail on each other. Vin Diesel has a chance to kill The Rock and chooses not to, so he clearly won the fight. And this was before those egos really took over the franchise, and I think it is for the betterment of the movie. And I think that's why this is a lot of people's favorite movie, is it's an action movie, and the stars are willing to let their characters be hit or whatever and lose a fight and stuff in service of the movie, as opposed to just always needing to win and look cool on camera.
All right. Well, speaking of favorites, what order are you going to rank the first 5 Fast and Furious?
Yeah, for me, it goes 5, 4, 1, 3, 2.
Oh, we almost had the same order. Mine is 5, 4, 1, 2, 3. I really didn't like Tokyo Drift.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's that bad. Like, it's not great, but it's not that bad.
I like the second one better. Has Eva Mendes. She's cute.
That's true. But yeah, so those are our kind of thoughts, and just a recap, just kind of us sharing our thoughts on the first 5 movies. We are going to watch the next 4, as well as Fast 10 when it comes out this week, and we will give you our thoughts on that next week.
Money will come and go. We know that. The most important thing in life will always be the people in this room. Salute mi familia.
All right. Thank you for listening to our podcast this week. Make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Nerd and Normie, and tune into our podcast next Monday to hear our thoughts about the other 5.
Yeah, and if you are listening on a podcast player, please give us a 5-star review if you could. And if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Thank you.